Good morning. This webinar offers closed captioning. Welcome to the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection free business education webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. All BACP webinars are part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, which is a free program for anyone interested in starting or growing a business in Chicago. Getting your certificate is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, register for the program. 2, attend 6 webinars in 6 months. 3, graduate to get your certificate. Graduating makes you eligible to apply for CIBC Bank's Entrepreneurial Loan Program. Note that you must already be registered for the program to get credit for attending today's webinar. For full details, visit chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are those of the presenter and are not the official policy or position of the City of Chicago or BACP. The information will be posted in the chat box. Today's webinar will be Branding Principles, How to Amplify Your Brand, presented by National Association of Women Business Owners, Chicago member Ginna Ryan, principal and owner of Mauge. Ginna?
Good morning, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to NAWBO Chicago and the City of Chicago's BACP outreach for this opportunity. I am going to share my screen, and I wanted to let you all know that this is I don't want to be a talking head up here. I let Gwendolyn know that I am happy to take questions in between, whatever, I want to have this be a good conversation and enlightening and interesting one for you as well. So as she said, I am with Mauge. We are a boutique brand experts here in the Chicagoland area. We've been in the Wicker Park Bucktown neighborhood since 1997. And I have been with the organization since 1998. And it's been an honor to participate in the growth of our organization. So talking about branding principles. Just make sure that I get this to go down. The first thing I want to talk about is that businesses live through their brands and brands live through their creative. That's how people identify you as a business organization. Our job is to energize, clarify, and differentiate. That is what good brands do. And it takes work. And the work starts with naming. So, regardless of what we are trying to quote unquote brand, we work with clients on a couple different categories: real estate, whether it's a project or an organization, professional service providers. So, we've got attorneys, physicians, doctors, photographers, all different kinds of professional service providers. And then we work with clients in the automotive space. So we work with clients who have auto dealer groups with a variety of manufacturers. So our job is to brand that dealer group as opposed to just focusing on the manufacturer. So clients come to us and they say, I am starting a new company. I'm starting a new service or a product, and we have to come up with a name. So the first part that we do is keep the name simple, but make sure it's clean. And what that means is you don't want it to be used elsewhere. That can be done through a very simple Google search. It can be done, you can dig and do a lot of research based on, let's say we're doing a piece of real estate. It's a research as to where this real estate is going to live, what the genesis behind it. And also very often when someone comes to us because they want to they want to create a brand, it's all about the story, right? And we'll get to that a little bit. So let's say you decide on a name or we decide to work with you on a name together. We purchase all the associated domains. You can have a number of URLs that are associated with that name so that people understand and can find you in a couple different ways, because you don't know until you start using that name how people are going to find it. We recommend developing an email address right away, consistent with the entity name. And then, if necessary, you can engage a trademark attorney, which should be done very, very early in the process and to assist in securing a name. Now, I'm not an attorney, but we have used trademark attorneys, so I can touch on this very, very briefly. A trademark attorney will do what they call a knockout search. And what that does is they do a very, very preliminary search to see if the name that you've chosen or that we have helped you come up with is available if you decide to trademark it. It is a bit of a process, and from a trademarking standpoint, and you do need to use a trademark attorney to do that. Now, you can do it on your own, but my recommendation is that you use a trademark attorney to help you with that. Again, and we can talk a little more if you have more questions about this. We were engaged to help a client rebrand a collection of multifamily properties. So we went to them and said, okay, let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish with this name change. It was an existing, well-established real estate group. And for example, we came up with City View Collection, and then we had the associated URL or domain of cityviewcollection.com. Now you'll see that was $20. So that's just where you go in and you buy the URL, the domain name. Another option was City View Living, cityviewliving.com. That name happened to already be purchased, and so you could buy it at auction. You could present an offer to buy that name. Could be that they loved this name and it was worth it to them to go to auction on that one. They didn't end up using this name, so this is a good example. Knowing success takes collaboration from the start. It's collaboration between you, any of your additional stakeholders, us, our team, our creatives. We open by listening to your story and how you tell it. The story is very, very important in understanding what you're trying to accomplish and where you're trying to go with this new brand. We focus on who you serve, how you serve them, and where we fit into the process. Then once we discover your wants and audit your assets, if they exist, we explore your market to define your needs, establish a scope, and plot a proper course of action. One of the first things that you want to do, and the reason I talked about a name first is it could be that you're going to do this piece first. You're going to create your product definition. But many people come to the table with a name before they even do this. So those two things kind of go hand in hand. What type of market are you serving? Are you serving a business to business market, B2B, or business to consumer market, B2C? Some of our clients are B2B, but the ultimate user is a consumer. So we have to consider, even though we are selling and to our client who is a business, we have to consider the end user. And who is that end user? You have to look at your demographics, psychographics, when determining who that end user is. What are their demographics, and what do they like to do? What are their hobbies? How do they spend their time? Where do they live? That kind of thing. You want to clearly communicate your brand promise. That's going back to who you serve and how you serve them. Let's talk about messaging. Equipped with our insights and jointly crafted strategy, we build prototyping creative that manifests your purpose and communicates your impact before iterating options and applications alongside you. What that means is that we are trying to understand your story as you've told it, and we come back to you with some messaging. It could be a tagline for your product. It could be messaging that will be included in your collateral materials, on your website, in your social media. The brand narrative that we're going to create will incorporate all of the elements of your product definition. And it will be short and sweet in some places and a little longer in other places, depending upon how it's used. I'm going to give you two brands. Good brands are memorable. And since their colors, logos, and icons are what people see first, their signatures are what people remember most. And these are two brand signatures that we have created. One is Lakeshore East, which is a neighborhood east of Michigan Avenue at Randolph. It used to be a par 3 golf course, and it created 5,000 residential and some retail units. And they created a whole new neighborhood, and we were charged a very long time ago in 2000 to create the logo for the development. Now, in that development, there's 12 buildings, and they each have their own identity, but the neighborhood was called Lakeshore East. They did come to us with a name, and we created the logo, and then we created the associated collateral that went with promoting this neighborhood. Now, Atari, some of you may or may not know, it's a very old brand that had an original logo that was updated, and my business partner was involved in doing that in the 80s and early 90s. When you're creating a brand, there's a few elements that are standard. The brand narrative, as we talked about before, that's the story. The logo, the ligature only, which is the letters, or it includes an icon. Very often today, we include an icon. It's unusual to not have an icon with a brand. The typography system is the font or the lettering, the color palette, and imagery. What I mean by imagery is that we tend to create mood boards. So when you talk about what you're trying to evoke or what you're trying to create for your brand, we then develop associated imagery for that brand. And it could be lifestyle, it could be location, it could be people. It all depends. It could look, it's really about the look and feel of your brand. That's all these things incorporate the look and feel of your brand. I'm just going to check in and see if there are any questions right now that I might jump to before I continue.
Sure, there is one. Where do you buy the URL? Is there a main website?
Yep, there's a couple. We use Namecheap, or you can go to GoDaddy. Those are a couple that we use on a regular basis.
Great. That was the only question right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll continue. Here's another brand that we did. I hope you guys can see this okay. I'm going to make this a little bit. So this is what we call a style guide. So we talked earlier about having the name, the font system, the icon, and the color palette. So this brand guide or style guide incorporates all of those things so that you have one place to go to that you can use or anybody in your organization can use so they know exactly how to present and use your logo, your icon, your fonts. And that what that does is you look at the typography and we provide a headline number 2. Sometimes it's 1 or 2, sometimes it's as many as this one where it's 3 or 4. So you have headline copy, you have body copy, and then the color palettes. And then the variety of the logos. So we give a vertical logo, horizontal logo, the icon and the name separated. Very, very often a brand or a logo is shown in black and white. So we always make sure that whatever we're creating shows well in black and white. And what white is obviously just reversed out. So that is a really important element because if you have signage or something where you're doing a presentation where you have to have a reversed out logo. You have to have those as elements of your logo presentation. This is a brand guide. And the difference between the style guide and the brand guide is this is much more involved. This was an organization that had been in existence and purchased a 35-year-old company that didn't really have any kind of branding, or they were just sort of behind the scenes. Their brand wasn't as important to the market they served because they were public facing and they worked with public facing entities as opposed to private organizations. So we created a whole new brand for Pacific Construction. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit again. So you can see we had something you could see on a tablet. We have a table of contents. We have a full brochure of sorts that outlines everything. It's a little more involved than the style guide. So the brand manual, as I mentioned before, is the guide to defining the usage rules of your brand. It gives the name, slogans, all your product definitions, your web domains, logo types, icons, the typographic system, the color palette, and the imagery. And as I mentioned, everything again is in one place. So that way, you and any of your colleagues know exactly where to find everything and how to use it going forward. The style guide it's similar, it's just a little bit shorter. And the next thing that we can talk about in terms of amplifying your brand is creating that marketing plan. Now you've got your brand, what are you going to do with it? So you have to talk about your goals. What are your goals for promoting the brand? Your target demographics, your primary messaging. Now, we did develop some brand narrative with the brand guide or the style guide, but when you want to talk about the primary messaging that you're going to put out to the public or to your chosen client group, decide on the channels. Are you going to use social media? We talked earlier a YouTube channel. Cadence is how often are you communicating with the audience that you are trying to reach? Ad types, print, digital, out of house, which is billboards, that kind of thing. There's so many different ways to communicate. Social, and then you got to think about your budget. So all these things are taken into consideration when you're building a marketing plan. Designing customized branded ads for multi-channel campaigns. Now, when you have creative, every single one of these options take your brand and expand it, but they're based on whatever those ad specifications require. Out of house, out of home, you're talking, it could be a giant static billboard. Obviously, you've all seen billboards out of house and they vary in size. You got the ones that are by the expressway or one that's on the side of a building that is what they call, it's just I'm blanking on the word. It's a little smaller side on the side of a building. Search engine SEO, and sometimes SEO can be organic or where you're picking specific keywords. Well, keywords are always included, or you have paid ads. Social media, same thing. You can have organic social or you can have paid social. Emails. And then when you're talking about email, you want to look at an email program, perhaps like a HubSpot or MailChimp, where you develop a plan and you have things going out on a regular basis. Radio, obviously radio is going to be the spoken word, and you have to write commercials and get them recorded. Print, believe it or not, print is still out there. A lot of people don't believe that print is a successful medium for promoting their business, but our clients use direct mail on a regular basis. You all get it in your mailbox for better or worse. but it's out there. Events and promotables. We all have apparel and Stanley or Yeti mugs or umbrellas that we want to have to use our logo on. Can we talk a little to see if there's any questions about this? Because I know that this is a big area and it's typically challenging for people once they get their brand done, and that is a lot of heavy lifting. Now, what do I do with this?
Hi. So the only questions I see really coming in is what's the average cost to get a style board or brand guide done?
You know, I'll be honest, I'm not comfortable sharing that because it really is a gamut. It just depends upon where people are in the process.
Not a problem.
Um, yeah, so I'm happy to talk to people one-on-one. There's just a lot of different variables.
Okay. Another question, what about TV?
Good point. I did not put TV, I did not put broadcast on here. So broadcast is something where it combines the ad creative visuals as well as like radio where you have a broadcast and you have to record. So that is definitely something that you can do. There are opportunities. One thing that I used to love was Comcast because you could do it based on a certain region or a neighborhood or a zip code. There are still opportunities out there to do that. Broadcast is typically a very expensive option, but there are opportunities today that are different than that provide you an opportunity like a Comcast where you can target a geo target, I'm going to say, where you can be a little more specific about where it's going.
Great. Another question, how do you prioritize which promotional materials to invest in? Which one of these on the list has worked best for you?
Honestly, it is across the board. It's all about who you're trying to reach, what your budget is, how often you want to promote your product, and the time the time of year. Honestly, the time of year, the season makes a difference. So I can't tell you that one is performed better systematically. It all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And I could make recommendations based on what it is you're doing. I could say, you should be focused on this.
Great. Does the color depend on the type of business you have, or can you use any color for your business to bring in traffic?
It's Let me clarify. It's a good question. The color's not about bringing in traffic. The color is about creating the brand. So you have to pick the color palette that resonates with you individually, as well as what you're trying to create. It's not, now, I'm not going to say that color doesn't impact traffic, bringing in traffic, because there is some element of that, but I wouldn't say that's the priority.
What about podcasting?
Podcasts are great. A lot of people don't like to speak. So podcasting opportunities are terrific to promote your brand and you as a ambassador of that brand. So that's a double whammy in my opinion. So you're the best person to typically, maybe not always, to promote your brand.
Great. For a startup company, at what point is it worth making an investment in branding?
Uh, Very beginning. I think you have to start with your branding at the very beginning. I know it's challenging because it's a cost outlay, but that will help to convey to your consumer. I'm going to use that term broadly, and solidify in their mind who you are, because that's how people are going to remember you. I'll give you an example that we just worked on. A gentleman who has two different kinds of business. He's an attorney and does some consulting work, as well as he can buy and sell real estate for clients. He had a brand for years and now is refreshing that brand because he's doing a little more in terms of promoting the two businesses together. He's trying to bring them together. And he's so excited to launch this new brand. So it doesn't have to be now, as much as I want people to invest intellectually as well as financially in developing a brand, it's not like you can't do it later. People come to us all the time to refresh a brand, to say, I'm launching a new part of my business. This is a perfect time to change my brand. Or if you're moving and you're saying, okay, I'm moving to a bigger place, I need to refresh and update my brand. So we've updated our brand probably 3 times since I've been here.
Okay, great. Do you suggest using your picture? Right now, they're asking they have their picture as a logo. Is that a good idea? Should they rebrand? So thoughts on using their photos.
Can you get a little more detail on that? Obviously, personal, when the most place I see that is insurance and real estate. So your picture is not your logo. The picture is a way for people to identify you as associated with that brand, but that is not your logo or your brand. So I'm not going to say no, you shouldn't use it because sometimes it makes sense, but that is not the logo or the brand.
Great. What is the difference between branding and positioning?
Positioning is part of the branding. Trying to figure out where your product fits in, product or service fits in. So brand positioning is part of the overarching brand development.
Just looking through any other questions.
Sure, absolutely.
How does this presentation correlate to branding yourself? Someone without a startup business, so more personalized branding.
What I think, how I think that that relates is if you are the brand, you still are offering, that's typically where you're offering a service, right? So you are promoting yourself as an expert in XYZ service. You can still apply the ligature, the font, the colors. So some of these elements still, I mean, they still apply. It's just they still apply. You are promoting yourself as an expert in whatever it is that whatever service you're providing. And if someone wants to ask to provide more details, I can get into that a little bit more. So these things still apply, in my opinion.
Okay, great. Last question. I'm working on a video game under my new video game company. Should I focus on branding first or trade marketing for the game? Or both?
Can you say that question again, please?
Sure. I am working on a video game under my new video game company. Should I focus on branding for the company first or trademarking for the game?
Well, it's been a long time since I've worked in the electronic gaming space, and I could actually get you a more specific answer if that person wants to reach out to me directly. Couple questions. Is your company, you have a new company, is the company been promoted to date, or will the launch of this game launch your company as well?
They have the launch of the
Be-
game will launch the company, not much promotion so far.
Okay. So from a trademarking situation, games, electronic gaming is pretty particular about, you think of like Madden and, there's lots of, there's so much out there. I would consult a trademark attorney to better understand the answer to that question. I can provide a couple recommendations if necessary. Um, so I think at this point, if you're developing the game and that is what you're protecting, that probably would come first. So, intellectual property. So you're trademarking intellectual property of the game as well as the name of the game. If that makes sense.
Great, thank you. Is there a way to check the strength of a business name?
Yeah. Well, that is what the trademark attorney will do. Now, it depends upon how you're defining strength, how strong it is in terms of what its impact will be in the marketplace. That's challenging. In terms of strength of your ability to protect it, that's where the trademarking comes in. um, the name from a strength position in the market is something that comes with time. It can be a little challenging to try to do that on the outset.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions right now.
Okay, so I just have one more thing to go on the ads. Um, Digital ad content. And we talked a little bit, I'm going to go back to this screen for a second, that design and custom branded ads for multi-channel campaigns. They all require different mechanical specs, is what we call them. They all look a little different, but everything still is aligned with your overarching brand for that you've developed. But these are the different kinds of things you can, and again, this is not a full summary, but these are the ones we see mostly. Google search ads, retargeting ads. And that's why I was talking about that whole concept of geo targeting, where you want to just focus on a specific zip code or region. That's where you do retargeting. IP targeted ads. We all get served ads all day, every day. Social media, Facebook posts and stories, Instagram posts and stories. Now, very often people are very savvy today and they can do these things for themselves. The key here, in my opinion, is that you make sure that you're always referring back to your brand. You want to make sure, especially if you have a website, you want to make sure that you're not, or let me just specify, if you have your website that you're using, you don't want to take people off your website to get additional information. You want to keep them as close to your website as possible. If you're doing social media, you want them to stay on your page as long as possible. So that's always the goal, is to stay as close to what it is that you have developed instead of moving on to something else, because people get distracted. So these are the main digital ad contents that we find, and these are the main other kind of multi-channel. And then we can add broadcast in there as well. So that is the end of my presentation. Is there anything specific that you would like me to go back to talk about the brand guide, the process that we go through to develop a name or a brand? And I can talk about that a little bit if that would be helpful. And again, this is just our process. I'm sorry to be scrolling through here.
There are a few more questions that came in.
Great.
Do you recommend creating a different brand name to offer a closely related service, or keep it under your current brand?
Typically your current brand, and have it, if it's closely related, I would, again, without knowing details, I would say this is a product or service of your main brand.
Is it better to be known for offering one service or various services?
Depends upon what the services are. If they are related, I can give you, let's talk about my job as an agency, in my role as an agency. People know us for branding and marketing. That's our core capabilities. However, we offer related services. We do print collateral, we do digital marketing, we do websites. So you have to let people know the full scope of your service offerings, but as long as they're related, you can have them focus on your primary, and then bring them in for that and make sure people know everything that you offer.
Great. When choosing an expert to assist with branding and marketing of my company, is it important to choose a person/firm with expertise in the particular industry/sector of my company?
My initial response is yes. We have built a very strong reputation for real estate marketing, and we work with clients in all asset classes. We have also built a strong reputation for people who are professional service providers, and then those, venture and enterprise we talk about. I don't do consumer products. I'm not going to tell you that I couldn't do it, but that's not my core competency. So, yes, my opinion is it doesn't have to be exact, but it has to be in the same realm. For example, we are pitching a project that is a service organization. We have not done that exact type of business, but we have worked on various parts of other businesses that relate to that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. How critical or important is branding if you are soliciting investors?
Extremely. One of the biggest things that we have been doing over the last year is working with people on their investment memorandums, their offering memorandums. I've worked with a colleague who is pitching a food product. It is absolutely imperative that you have a strong brand identity and you can tell your story short and sweet and why that should matter to them.
Great. Are there any distinct differences in branding for a nonprofit versus a profit brand?
You know what? We do both, and I would say no. For profit and non for profit still want to have a basic identity and a brand identity. So they all need to resonate with the audience that you're trying to attract.
Great. If the finances are not available currently to hire a trademark attorney, can you recommend some affordable options for trademark logos, intellectual properties, just some resources that people could go to?
I really cannot because that is not my area of expertise. I can tell you that I had a situation with a trademark attorney who referred me a client who had tried to do his trademark on his own and it failed twice. So he finally came to her. Um, I wish I could tell you that I can make recommendations. I'm just not comfortable doing that.
Okay. Is keeping someone,
I will say let me just say one thing. Sorry
yeah,
about to
sure.
interrupt you.
No worries.
The USPTO, which is the US um, Patent and Trademark Office, that is the one place you can go to get some resources to understand what the process is.
Does keeping someone on your website hold true if you are selling a good? Currently, I have it set for my site to go to where 90% of sales are made from Etsy.
I'm not sure I understand that question. Could you say that again?
Does keeping someone on your website hold true if you are selling a good? Currently, I have it set for my site to
Ah,
go to where
now I know
90%
what they're referring to. I
okay.
said you didn't want them to go off the site. But your selling mechanism is Etsy. So that is the buying platform, right? So it, in that situation, it's a little bit of both. So that's an excellent point. Etsy is showing your work, but it's also where they buy. So it depends upon how you display what it is they can buy on your website versus on Etsy. Obviously, you want to get them to Etsy because that's where they're going to make a purchase.
Okay, great. I have a cleaning company and want to add physical products for clients and digital products for solo cleaner, teaching them how to reach a certain amount in revenue. Should I keep everything on one website or separate the digital products since it's targeting different people?
So I would say you keep them all on one site and it's different tabs. How you promote that can be different. You can lead people to various parts of your website based on who it is you're targeting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Think of them as sort of landing pages, right? Your digital is one landing page. Your goods and services or another landing page, for example.
Great. Can you talk more about color palettes when creating your logo and branding?
Sure. Um, I'll give you a couple different options or scenarios. So very often someone will come to us and say, I love the color blue. And I love the color blue. I have a very corporate brand. I would like to have a pop of color. So for example, so we take all that information in. Another situation is we're working on a real estate project. And it's an apartment building, and they're working with an architect and interior designer. So we know what all the common areas look like and what the finishes are going to look like and the colors of the building. We'll take all of those things into consideration when we're looking at the color palette for the brand and the logo, the branding, the logo, the icon. It just depends upon where we're starting in terms of the color palette.
Okay, great. When posting on social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram, how should one post on these platforms to generate more interest?
That's a very it's an in-depth question. It really depends upon what you're promoting, who you're promoting to, how you're talking about your product, about the brand narrative, about the messaging. All those things come into consideration when you're talking about that. I don't know that I answered that question, but you have to consider all of those things. You know, sometimes it's color, sometimes it's always messaging, right? You always want to talk about the messaging and who your end user is.
Great. Does storytelling come with branding services?
Storytelling is what we do, the brand. That's what we talk about, the brand narrative. It depends upon the extent to the storytelling that you require. So some people want us to just do their brand and do a tagline or something like that. Other people say, I need you to help me with my marketing collateral. I need a brochure. I need my website. And we'll expand on that storytelling. So that's when they asked about the cost. It depends upon how extensive those services are.
Okay, great. And again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on BACP's YouTube page. I will put that website in the chat. Excellent presentation, lots of thank yous. We'll give everyone another minute to put their questions in the chat.
Should I stop sharing at this point?
Sure.
I really want to thank everybody for being here. And again, thank you to BACP for inviting me. And I'm hoping that this was helpful. I know it was very basic, but hopefully people got some inspiration and understanding of how to move forward with their brand.
Great. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Thank you, Ginna. We really appreciate this great information you provided. Hoping everyone has a great, safe, and warm weekend. I hear it's supposed to warm up,
Yes,
so hopefully.
supposed to warm up. Exactly.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.